the cure for some of the most just devastating conditions on Earth. I mean, we're talking cervical paralysis, fatal arrhythmias, Alzheimer's. It isn't currently sitting in some sterile, multi-billion-dollar Swiss lab. It's actually sitting in a pile of rotting coffee branches in Costa Rica.
Right, and this is what I love about it. It completely shatters our basic assumption that the absolute highest levels of medical technology require these, incredibly synthetic, highly controlled environments.
It really does. It's wild. Welcome to today's deep dive. We have an incredible mission for you today. We are unpacking a groundbreaking 2026 doctoral thesis from Martín Gutiérrez Guerrero.
Yeah, he's a Costa Rican scientist and the CEO of Nova Amazonia.
Right, and he's proposing a solution to some of the absolute most complex challenges in modern medicine, and he's doing it using an entirely unexpected raw material, which is leftover coffee pruning waste, literally just agricultural trash.
Exactly. He takes this discarded biomass and transforms it into something called 3D BioG.
3D BioG.
Yeah, that stands for three-dimensional biogenic graphene. And, for anyone listening who might be a little skeptical right now, this is not just some theoretical chalkboard concept.
Right. It's actually happening.
It is a manufactured reality. They are taking agricultural waste and turning it into a medical nanomaterial that physically and electrically interfaces directly with the human brain, the heart, the nervous system. And, as a bonus, the manufacturing process actively fights climate change.
I mean, I want to spend a lot of time on how this actually interfaces with the human body, because it is just mind-bending. But to understand why coffee waste of all things is so revolutionary, we really need to understand the baseline, right? Like, why are our traditional, highly engineered medical materials failing when we put them inside a patient?
Well, it all comes down to how we manufacture them. So if you look at the medical industry's absolute gold standard for producing graphene today, they use something called the Hummers method.
The Hummers method.
Right, which was developed way back in 1958.
Oh, wow. So it's old.
Very. You take natural graphite, and to separate the layers, you essentially blast it with concentrated sulfuric acid and other incredibly harsh oxidizers.
I mean, that just sounds like a super violent chemical process.
It is. It's brutal. And it technically works, to isolate the graphene. But the violence of that chemical reaction completely, permanently destroys the material's natural, beautiful two-dimensional network.
Oh, so it ruins the structure.
Yeah, you're left with this structure full of microscopic defects. And honestly, more importantly, you can never fully wash it clean.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it leaves behind these tiny toxic residues, trace amounts of acid and heavy metals.
And obviously, the human body is going to be incredibly sensitive to, acid and heavy metals. So what actually happens when a surgeon implants a material like that into someone?
Right, so it triggers a cascading immune response known as opsonization.
Opsonization.
Exactly. When the body's immune system detects those chemical residues, it immediately sounds the alarm. It literally marks the foreign material with serum proteins.
Like painting a target on it?
Essentially, yes. It's painting a giant tracking beacon on the implant. And that beacon summons macrophages, which are, the body's aggressive cleanup cells.
So the macrophages just swarm the implant trying to break it down?
Yes, but they can't easily break down a synthetic implant, so the whole area becomes trapped in this state of chronic inflammation.
Ouch.
Yeah, the surrounding tissue just scars over, and eventually the medical device fails completely.
Okay, so this is where Gutiérrez Guerrero's thesis introduces a completely different philosophy. Instead of trying to force graphite apart with, harsh chemicals, he takes the waste wood from coffee plants and uses extreme heat.
Yes, extreme pyrolysis.
Right, extreme pyrolysis. We are talking about baking this wood at 1100 degrees Celsius inside a vacuum of pure nitrogen.
And that nitrogen environment is the crucial detail there.
Because it doesn't burn.
Exactly. Because there is absolutely zero oxygen present in the chamber, the coffee wood literally cannot catch fire. It doesn't burn to ash. Instead, it slowly carbonizes.
And because it carbonizes without burning, the physical structure of the plant just remains totally intact. Like the natural three-dimensional vascular structure, the tiny microscopic plumbing system the coffee plant originally used to pull water up from its roots, it's perfectly preserved.
Right, but now it's made of pure carbon.
Right.
And the measurements on the resulting material are just staggering. When material scientists measure the purity of this new 3D BioG, they use a metric called a Raman purity ratio,
Okay.
and it scores less than 0.05.
Which means what exactly?
That indicates a structure with almost zero physical defects.
Yeah.
And because all those microscopic plant tubes are perfectly preserved, the surface area is massive. Like 1 single gram of this material contains up to 1,200 square meters of surface area.
Okay, let me make sure I'm visualizing the difference here. Is this basically like trying to build a skyscraper out of smashed, chemically melted Lego blocks, which is the Hummers method, versus just taking an empty high-rise that nature already perfectly constructed and moving right in?
What's fascinating here is that high-rise analogy perfectly captures the immunological advantage.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Hmm.
because this carbon is biogenic. It grew organically inside a living plant, and because the heat treatment leaves it completely chemically neutral with zero acid residues, the human immune system simply ignores it.
It just doesn't see it.
Exactly. There are no chemical triggers to set off those protein alarm bells. It doesn't summon the macrophages at all. It operates essentially as a ghost in the machine, making it just the absolute perfect hidden material for long-term medical implants.
And if it's invisible to the immune system, that allows us to place it into the most delicate, highly protected areas of the human body, right? The electrically active organs.
Yes, precisely.
Okay, so let's look at the
Right.
brain, specifically brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs. For anyone listening who's unfamiliar, these are the implants placed into the motor cortex that allow patients with severe cervical paralysis to move robotic limbs or, type on a screen just by thinking.
Right. And it's obviously life-changing technology. But the tragic flaw with current BCIs is their lifespan. They typically fail within just 2 to 5 years.
Which is so short for a brain implant.
It is. And it's not because of the software. It comes down to basic mechanical physics. The current electrodes are made of rigid metals like silicon or tungsten,
Okay.
and they have a stiffness of roughly 130 to 450 gigapascals. But human brain tissue is incredibly fragile and soft. It has a stiffness of only 0.5 to 5 kilopascals.
To put those numbers in perspective for you, we are essentially shoving something with the rigidity of a steel nail into an organ that has the physical consistency of warm jello.
That is exactly the mechanical mismatch. So think about what happens when a patient just exists. Every single time they take a breath, every single time their heart beats, the brain pulses slightly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and every time it pulses, that rigid metal electrode microscopically scrapes against the soft brain tissue.
Just nonstop microtrauma. I mean, no wonder the brain fights back.
Right. It's a defense mechanism called reactive gliosis. The brain builds this dense glial scar around the invading electrode to cushion itself against the scraping.
Right, to protect itself.
Exactly. But that scar tissue acts as a really thick electrical insulator. So the electrical signals from the neurons can no longer reach the electrode, and the device essentially just goes deaf.
But because 3D BioG is derived from the porous, totally flexible structure of a plant, it has a stiffness of just a few kilopascals, right?
Yes.
It perfectly matches the softness of the human brain. So instead of scraping, it physically squishes and moves in tandem with the brain tissue. By eliminating that mechanical friction, you stop the reactive gliosis scarring before it even starts.
Exactly. And we see a similar mechanical rescue mission in the human heart, actually.
Oh, with heart attacks.
Yeah. Consider what happens after a myocardial infarction, a heart attack. A section of the heart muscle literally dies from a lack of oxygen.
Right.
The body heals that area by replacing it with scar tissue.
The problem being that scar tissue doesn't conduct electricity.
Precisely. And the heart completely relies on a continuous, synchronized electrical wave to tell the cells exactly when to contract.
So it hits a dead end.
Basically, yeah. When that electrical wave hits the dead zone of scar tissue, the signal crashes. It has to awkwardly detour around the blockage, which totally disrupts the rhythm and causes fatal arrhythmias.
So Gutierrez Guerrero's team is placing a patch of this 3D BioG right over the dead scar tissue. But wait, so we're laying a biological jumper cable over the dead part of the heart. But how does the shape of a coffee plant actually trick human heart cells into behaving like healthy tissue?
It's through a process called geometric templating.
Geometric templating, okay.
Human cells are actually highly sensitive to their physical surroundings. The internal channels of this specific coffee plant happen to be the exact perfect width, about 5 to 80 micrometers, to perfectly mimic the natural orientation of human cardiac fibers.
That's crazy.
I know. The heart cells physically feel those microscopic grooves and align themselves. And once they are physically aligned on this highly conductive surface, it forces the cells to start producing a specific protein called connexin 43, or CGI 43.
Okay, what does Seacrest 23 do?
That protein is essentially the biological communication wire between cells. It basically forces them to sync up and beat in perfect, synchronized harmony again.
That is just mind-blowing. We are literally using a discarded plant's internal plumbing to conduct electricity across a human heart.
Yeah.
But we also have to talk about how this material moves things physically inside the body, because that enormous surface area, the 1,200 square meters per gram, it gives it an entirely different superpower when it comes to targeted healing, especially regarding cancer.
Oh, absolutely. The way we deliver chemotherapy today is often compared to a sledgehammer.
Yeah, chemo is rough.
Right. You are flooding the patient's entire systemic circulation with highly toxic chemicals, just hoping the poison kills the tumor slightly faster than it kills the healthy organs. But 3D BioG offers a microscopic delivery mechanism that utilizes a phenomenon called pipe stacking.
Okay, I've seen that term in the research, and it always sounds a bit abstract to me. What does pipe stacking actually mean in the context of this material?
Sure, so it describes a purely physical geometric bond rather than a chemical reaction. On a molecular level, the surface of 3D BioG is perfectly flat and planar.
Okay.
It turns out many of our most aggressive chemotherapy drugs, like doxorubicin or DOX, are also perfectly flat molecules. Because they share this exact specific geometry, the drug molecules physically stack right on top of the graphene surface and bond really tightly to it.
Oh, so it's essentially like molecular Velcro.
Yes.
The chemo drug just naturally sticks to the 3D BioG, and it won't let go while it's traveling through the bloodstream, which means it isn't, poisoning the healthy tissue along the way. But then how do you get it to unhook once it actually reaches the tumor?
The doctors use a remote control, essentially.
A remote control.
Basically, they apply a mild external radio frequency focused exclusively on the physical location of the tumor. The 3D BioG absorbs that specific frequency and locally heats up by just 4 to 8 degrees Celsius.
Wow. Just a tiny temperature bump.
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
That small increase in thermal energy is enough to vibrate and physically break that pipey bond. The Velcro unhooks.
Amazing.
It releases a massive, highly lethal dose of the chemotherapy drug exactly on top of the tumor and literally nowhere else.
So we have the flat surface acting as a delivery vehicle, but the physical shape of the material, those intact microscopic tubes we talked about, does something even more incredible when we look at regenerating severed nerves.
Yes.
If someone is in a terrible accident and severs a long peripheral nerve, the current FDA limit for an artificial nerve conduit, the little tube surgeons use to guide the nerve back together, is a 30-millimeter gap.
Right. If the gap is longer than 30 millimeters, the growing nerve fibers essentially just get lost in the dark. They can't find the other side to reconnect, which results in permanent loss of function.
But the microchannels in the 3D BioG are between 5 and 80 micrometers wide. And it turns out that is the exact architectural dimension needed to create a literal subway tunnel for Schwann cells.
And Schwann cells are essentially the biological construction workers responsible for rebuilding our nerve fibers.
Exactly. The Schwann cells migrate down these continuous coffee plant channels without ever getting lost. It's a perfect, uninterrupted pathway. Because of this, they can actually bridge nerve gaps of 50 to 80 millimeters.
This is huge.
We are talking nearly triple the current FDA limit for nerve repair. And here's where it gets really interesting. The material naturally generates a microelectrical current to speed this up, just by using the body's ambient heat through the Seebeck effect. No batteries needed. It's like laying down a self-powered train track for human nerves.
Let me jump in and clarify that just slightly. It's not quite just ambient heat. The Seebeck effect requires a heat gradient. Think of it like a breeze flowing from a hot room into a cold hallway.
Right.
The material harnesses the energy from that temperature difference between the core tissue and the surrounding area.
Oh, okay. That makes much more sense. It's harvesting the difference in temperature to create the electrical charge.
Exactly. And that tiny self-generated microcurrent is incredibly stimulating to the nerve cells. It accelerates the nerve growth by 2 to 3 times the normal biological rate.
That's incredible. And if you think using plant structures to rebuild peripheral nerves is wild, Gutierrez Guerrero's thesis takes this structural transport thing to the absolute limit. He proposes using this material to bypass the most frustrating biological barrier in all of medicine.
The blood-brain barrier, or the BBB.
Yes.
The BBB is this evolutionary marvel designed to protect our central nervous system. It is a highly selective cellular filter that prevents toxins in our bloodstream from reaching the brain.
But from a medical standpoint, it is way too good at its job.
Exactly. It currently blocks roughly 98% of all pharmaceutical drugs from entering the brain.
If you have a loved one dealing with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, you probably know the absolute heartbreak of hearing that a promising new drug failed in clinical trials. What this research shows is that often the drug itself wasn't the problem at all, the delivery system was.
Right.
We actually have complex antibodies that can clear Alzheimer's plaques, but we just cannot physically shove them through that barrier in high enough concentrations to do any good.
So the proposed solution here involves taking the 3D BioG and breaking it down into nanogels.
Nanogels.
Yes, these are unimaginably small particles, just 50 to 200 nanometers wide. You infuse these nanogels with the Alzheimer's medication and simply inject them into the patient's bloodstream.
Okay.
And because the researchers incorporate a tiny magnetic component into the nanogels, doctors can use external magnetic fields to gently gather and concentrate the particles exactly where they are needed, right up against the blood vessels of the brain.
And then they use that exact same trick we saw with the cancer delivery. They apply mild radio waves.
Yes, exactly. The nanogels absorb the radio waves and heat the endothelial cells, the tightly packed cells that make up the barrier by just 3 to 6 degrees Celsius.
Such a small amount of heat.
But it works. This gentle, highly targeted heat physically relaxes the tight junctions between the cells. It coaxes them to open from their tightly locked state to about 4 to 16 nanometers wide.
It's quite literally picking the lock on a cellular level.
And it safely keeps those junctions open for a specific window of exactly 30 to 120 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Right. And during that time, the large, complex Alzheimer's antibodies can finally flood into the brain tissue. Once the dosage is delivered, they simply turn off the radio waves. The localized heat dissipates, and the barrier seamlessly and naturally heals shut, leaving the brain protected once again.
It just delivers the payload and locks the door behind it. Now, we've talked a lot about the delicate internal organs, but the thesis also explores an application for the outside of the body that sounds almost like pure science fiction. Severe third-degree burns.
Yes.
When a patient is in a burn ward, the biggest threat to their life usually isn't the initial burn trauma itself, it's bacterial infection, biofilms forming over the exposed tissue.
And those bacterial biofilms are notoriously resistant to heavy antibiotics.
Right.
But 3D BioG approaches the infection with a purely mechanical solution, rather than trying to outsmart the bacteria chemically. It utilizes what material scientists call the nanoblade effect.
The nanoblade effect, that sounds intense.
It is. Remember that a single sheet of graphene is literally 1 atom thick. If you look at the raw edge of a 3D BioG flake under a powerful electron microscope, that edge is essentially a razor-sharp blade at the nanoscale.
Okay.
When deadly bacteria like Staphylococcus aureus come into physical contact with the patch, the atomic edges physically slice open their cell membranes.
Wait, so instead of trying to outsmart the bacteria chemically, we're essentially just throwing them into a microscopic room full of razor wire. That is brilliantly brutal, but wait, doesn't the patch also light up?
It does, and this is where we see that Seebeck effect beautifully applied yet again.
Oh, the heat gradient thing?
Exactly. The burn patch utilizes the heat gradient of the wound. So the intense temperature difference between the hot, inflamed burn tissue and the cooler ambient air in the hospital room to generate a steady electrical current.
And what does it do with that current?
It uses it to power integrated red and infrared LEDs that are embedded right inside the dressing itself.
So it's literally lighting up on the skin. What does the light actually do for the burn?
It provides continuous photobiomodulation.
Photobiomodulation.
Yeah, those specific red and infrared wavelengths penetrate the tissue and actually stimulate the mitochondria and the surviving skin cells. It accelerates the growth of new blood vessels by 40 to 60%. So the patch mechanically slices the deadly bacteria to death while simultaneously bathing the wound in self-powered healing light.
It is absolute genius. But, as we walk through these clinical miracles, curing paralysis, sinking heart cells, picking the lock on the brain, slicing open bacteria, we have to pull back and look at the foundation of all of this.
Yeah.
Everything we just discussed is manufactured from literal garbage,
Right.
which completely flips the economic reality of the medical supply chain.
It really forces a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
To fully grasp the impact, you have to look at the current global market for medical-grade synthetic graphene.
Okay.
To make it synthetically, labs use highly controlled chemical vapor deposition, usually lowering it on top of copper or nickel substrates. It is astonishingly difficult and resource-intensive, which is why synthetic medical graphene costs up to $100,000 for a single gram.
$100,000 a gram.
Yeah.
And it creates a massive geopolitical bottleneck, right?
Mm.
Roughly 70% of that synthetic production is controlled by a single nation in China. It's effectively a monopoly on the raw material of the future. But let's look at Gutierrez Guerrero's math for the biogenic alternative. Right now, coffee pruning waste, just the dead branches and leaves left in the field after a harvest is worth maybe $10 to $30 per metric ton as a low-grade fertilizer.
Right. But once you run that exact same waste through the 1100-degree nitrogen pyrolysis and transform it into 3D BioG, its value just skyrockets. It becomes worth $50 to $500 per gram.
The economic multiplier on that is almost hard to comprehend.
It is. By validating agricultural waste as a premium medical precursor, the global South, countries across Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia instantly gains medical sovereignty.
Because they already have it.
Exactly. They already hold the raw materials needed to produce the absolute most advanced medical technology in the world, literally right there in their fields.
And the cost reduction for the end patient is just staggering. According to the data, utilizing 3D BioG drops the manufacturing cost of a continuous glucose monitor by 75 to 90%. The cost of a brain-computer interface implant drops by up to 94%. We are talking about taking precision medicine, which is normally reserved for the wealthiest individuals in Tier 1 medical facilities, and making it fundamentally affordable for public health systems in developing nations.
Yeah. And, we cannot overlook the environmental reality of this supply chain either.
Oh, right. The climate aspect.
Yeah, while the coffee plant was alive and growing, it was actively pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere to build those very branches. When the waste wood is processed at 1100 degrees Celsius in that nitrogen vacuum, it doesn't release that carbon back into the air.
Because it's not burning.
Right.
Yeah.
It permanently locks it into a highly stable, solid graphitic form that will not degrade for over a century.
Meaning the entire manufacturing process is carbon negative. Every single kilogram of 3D BioG produced actually sequesters a net 1.2 to 1.8 kilograms of CO2 equivalent.
The implication there is profound. The more medical material humanity produces to heal itself, the more carbon we permanently vacuum out of the atmosphere.
So, what does this all mean? We are taking agricultural trash, creating the most advanced medical tech on Earth, breaking global monopolies, and literally vacuuming carbon out of the atmosphere.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the true revolution isn't just the nanomaterial itself. It's the realization that the Global South holds the keys to the future of medicine right in its soil.
It really connects every aspect of human progress. If you are listening to this right now and you track your health with a wearable monitor, or you are desperate for a breakthrough in Alzheimer's research for a parent, or you simply care about global economic equity and stabilizing the climate, this single technology sits at the intersection of all those hopes. It literally connects the trash we throw away to the ways we heal.
It completely demands that we entirely reevaluate our definition of waste. We have spent decades trying to synthetically force rigid metals to do what nature had already geometrically perfected inside a simple, unassuming coffee plant.
And that leaves us with a fascinating, lingering question, something for you to really mull over long after this deep dive is finished. We started by talking about those sterile, billion-dollar labs where we expect the future of medicine to be born. But if we can perfectly repurpose the internal microplumbing of a discarded coffee branch to jumpstart human hearts and physically regrow severed nerves, what other unexamined weeds, vines, or agricultural waste products are sitting out in our fields right now? What else is just silently hiding the exact geometric blueprints needed to cure the rest of our incurable diseases?